It's pretty cool. When we did the editing and the taking
Which is so funny. It's just like, you can see it has a different response. Like, someone has an interview.
How are you doing? How are you doing?
How am I doing?
Did you guys go back to the party at my house?
Yeah. I didn't really Maybe, by the way, I heard that you're a drummer master.
Drummer
You
master.
need to be
Well, my presentation is going to be on the screen, but that's actually exactly what I'll be doing. Just 10-minute drum solo.
Just letting you know. I've heard you're just amazing. I've got said.
You're speaking so highly of me. Eric? Yes. In this room, oh my god.
For 10 minutes? That's jarring.
By the way, Christy does
Yeah, well, no, but I've been trying to. Chrissy's been back there, and I've been up here, and I got like, I'm gonna say 10 emails, 11, whatever emails, that I thought were spam emails. They're all NRSI stuff. It's all like payroll and this and that, and with no context. And I got to talk to Chrissy a little bit last night. And I was like, what do these emails mean? And she looked at them. She's like, I have no idea. No, I'm excited because you guys have a Hamilton spot set up now. Hopefully, if things go well, maybe we can bring the Mac crew out because we don't get any field experience, none whatsoever. So. Julian, have you met Marta and Tom Tom? Marta and Tom Tom. This is Julian. Julian, where's your poster? Where's your poster? Are you using?
No, Heather did.
Are you gonna present Heather's poster?
I don't even know what's on it. I looked at it this morning. I was like, what? I know. Yeah, Chrissy was like,
I can stand by it, sure.
smile. Smile face.
Do you remember when were you there when Toby gave a presentation for someone who couldn't show up? And he was just looking at it, oh, it was so funny. I wish we recorded it. But he gave a presentation, he had never seen the slides before. And he was just looking along and he's like,
Shane, when you're doing your presentation, do you want me to try and
yeah,
Brad's doing it?
something. You can do it. So all you gotta do
I don't even know what I got to do.
is just, so you can leave this completely alone. This is a slideshow. You just follow along with me.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah,
Okay.
and it'll change on this side. So you change this, it'll do everything on its own. And
So
then
I'm
this
just
is
tapping
the
down
YouTube.
when you tap down. Okay. Easy.
Make our way back to our seats.
Harder than you think, but easy.
Yeah.
Especially with animation. Jamie, the one with the moving band. The words and everything were like 2 seconds. Like, so I was like,
Just wanted to welcome everyone here for day 2 OBN. We don't have an elder coming out today, but thank you all for driving in the nice ice storm that we're having. And looking forward to a nice day. Some more good talks. And if anyone's interested, we're going to do a little convoy just through Shawanigan at lunchtime. You can stop by the church, see the condo. It's like a 2-minute trip. So if anyone's interested, it. We're going to go through that much now. Sweet.
Thank you. And yeah, so there's not a whole lot to cover this morning. Same things as yesterday. We know where the exits are. We know to watch for the wires. We know to turn off our cell phones so we're not getting calls from presentations.
This is game. So if you see a lot of feedback, just nudge this one down, and then this is what we're going to do.
Management taking care of all the you need me to help you with that?
I got it.
There's that. So our very own OC Shane.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Shane, and I'm so excited to talk to you about my PhD work looking at the development of binaural hearing in big brown bats. So I'll start with talking about a little bit of development in big brown bats. So here's a picture of me when I woke up this morning. It takes a little bit to get to what you see now, but it's very similar to a young juvenile big brown bat. You can see its eyes are closed, it's more naked and blind, and only after a few days do the bats really start to spring up and look alive. Maybe a little bit of coffee, a little bit of socializing. You can start to see the eyes are opening, the ears are a little bit perked up as opposed to flattened down. A few days later, we start to see fur growth. Moving forward, we see a little bit of wing flapping, which is this characteristic behavior where they're starting to exercise their wing muscles before eventually, excellent. You can see they're doing these immature, scooping-like flapping behaviors, again, exercising their wing muscles. Sometime later on, we get the eruption of canines. They're starting to get into mealworms a little bit further away from mom and nursing. And eventually, at about 25 to close to 30 days, we start to see powered flight, where they're truly able to do laps around the room. Absolutely fantastic. So I want to introduce to you a new developmental milestone that we noticed last summer, which is the opening of the external ear canal. So as you can see, is there a laser? Anyways, as you can see in the photos on the left-hand side, the ear canals in big brown bats are closed, which is rather fascinating considering how these animals were relying on their auditory processing. And after some days later, their ears will start to open. And we noticed something funny about this. The ears open asynchronously. One ear typically opens before the other. And there's usually about a day or two, maybe even 3 days of separation between the opening of the external auditory canal. And this timing asynchrony led to, again, the opening of the ear canals happening asynchronously, but we found that the left ear typically opens before the right, about 72% of the pups that we were measuring. And this ear opening delay is also associated with an increase in mass, as well as an increase in foramen. So there's some developmental changes going on while there's an asynchrony of auditory input from the animal. Again, significant increase in mass and foramen growth. So I'm going to introduce to you the technique that I use to measure auditory thresholds in big brown bats, and that's auditory brainstem response, or ADR recording. So what we do is we put the pups, we can of course record from adult big brown bats as well, in a little bat burrito, keep them nice and warm and snuggled up. And then we can place subdermal electrodes under the skin near the auditory opening. We can then put them on a pedestal, as you see here, and record their neural activity with a presentation of sounds. There's a little, over here, a little speaker which you can present different auditory stimuli to them and record the neural responses. In my case, I'm using in-ear headphones, so similar to AirPods, so that I can stimulate each ear independently of one another. The left, the right, and binaural. So what are we recording? Well, we're recording this summated neural activity of different nuclei along the ascending auditory pathway. So as you can see here, there's peaks and troughs associated with this neural activity, each attributed to a nuclei within this pathway.
So when we present sound stimuli, we're getting this snapshot of how the auditory system is working. We can then, if you're looking at the graph, present very, very loud stimuli at 80 decibels and get these nice and large peaks and troughs. And as we slowly start to decrease the volume, those peaks and troughs go away, indicative of no neural response being evoked by sound presentation. So, of course, I'm sure many of you have heard the saying, if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a neural response? So the bolded line you can see here at 35 decibels is indicative of that's auditory threshold. It's no longer producing an auditory response. So the lower you are in your threshold, the more sensitive you are to sound. So now I'm going to introduce to you my PhD project looking at binaural auditory processing in big round bats. And what I'm really focused on is the effective mode. We want to know, does the mode of stimulation, if I'm stimulating just the left ear on its own, just the right ear on its own, or both ears at the same time, affect auditory threshold? And we want to see if the ear that opens first in auditory development is more sensitive compared to the ear that opens later in development. We also want to look at the effective age. How is this changing over time? Do auditory thresholds decrease? Does the animal become more sensitive to sound over time? And we also want to look at the age-mode interaction. Does the change in auditory thresholds change relative to the mode of stimulation that you're presenting? So here's some data looking at the auditory thresholds in juvenile big brown bats across the first 30 days of life. Now, there's two really striking things about this figure. The first is that the monaural right, again, this ear that opens later in development, seems to be way, way less sensitive compared to monaural left, the ear that opens first typically, and binaural stimulation. The second really striking thing is that thresholds don't seem to change very drastically over the first month of life, considering that they are developing, as I showed earlier in the presentation, pretty rapidly over the first 30 days of life. I like giving this fact to non-bat biologists, but I usually get people to guess how long bats can live, and I'm sure that fact won't surprise you guys. So I took that data across the first 30 days of life now, and I've compressed it just to show less than 1 month. And now I'm showing you less than 1 month auditory thresholds at 3 months, and auditory thresholds in adult big brown bats. So as you can see, that discrepancy is very much so present in early development. But by about 3 months of age, we're not seeing that same discrepancy that we once saw. Thresholds seem to be dropping and becoming adult-like. And this initial asymmetry that we found seems to be diminishing relatively early in development, around 3 months of age. So in other words, we do see an effective mode. Right? The ear that opens later in development seems to be a little bit less sensitive compared to the ear that opens early in development, as well as binaural stimulation. We also see an effective age. Not in the original time scale we were looking at the first 30 days of life, but at by 3 months and of course into adulthood. And we also see an age by mode interaction. We see that these changes over time are occurring differently, such that the ear that opens first tends to be drastically changing, becoming way, way sensitive. Again, delayed in life, but rather dramatically. So what does this mean? Well, the asymmetry in the timing of the opening of the external auditory canal causes this initial asymmetry in hearing, and it naturally fixes itself. It's a natural animal model for unilateral hearing loss. They seem to have some deficits in the one ear that opens later in development that seems to be correcting itself. And of course, for the rest of my PhD, I'm looking at how does this affect the neural circuitry? What's going on? How are they processing these auditory cues with different amounts of input or sensitivity between the ears? And there may be an adaptive advantage. For instance, sawing owls have lateral displacement in their ears that help them with elevation cues. If they're trying to navigate or localize a sound, for instance, a mouse scurrying along the ground. And with that, I'd like to thank the McMaster Bat Lab, OBN of course, and Shwanaga for hosting us, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you. Yeah.
The asynchrony is fascinating. And has that opening of the ear asynchrony been noted in any other mammals or other animals, or is this a bat thing?
Not to my knowledge. It seems to be, I'm hesitant to call it a bat thing. I'd love to see what's happening in other bat species, but at least in big brown bats, mind you, it's typically a day's worth of separation. When we were initially looking at it, we didn't think very much of it, right? But it seems to be having this very drastic change in the auditory thresholds. So, yeah. Yes?
Do you think it would be related to learning activation?
In terms of learning, I'm not so sure. So again, this is very, very early stages, but I'm thinking it has to do with sound localization and auditory processing. So for instance, if you were to close your ear, you would get a lot of intensity coming in on the one side, with maybe a little bit of intensity coming through the other side. Of course, I'm telling you the auditory canal is closed, but you can get bone conduction through stimulation of the head. So they're likely receiving some auditory input, just not strong auditory input. My hypothesis that I'm hoping to test is whether or not that asynchrony leads to increased sensitivity to those interaural level differences, loudness differences between the ears. Why it's happening primarily in the left ear is still fascinating. It's keeping me up at night. Yes?
I was just wondering whether they are right-handed and left-handed bats.
That's me this at the bar last night. I'd love to test handedness or wingness in bats, but I'm not sure. Again, why it's so I will give the caveat that this particular study group all came from the same roost. So ideally what I want to do is collect bats from a separate roost and see if perhaps maybe 72% of their pups have the right ear open first. We did see some with the right ear open first. We also saw some that opened at the same time. Mind you, we're checking once daily, so yeah, I hope that helps.
Now, the handedness in humans have genetic basis.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think it's very
Yep.
Thank you. Oh.